You read my notebook? The words struck harder than the thunder, shaking the windows. Rain streamed down the glass walls of Joel West's Westlake Hills mansion, turning the night into a curtain of silver. Across the marble counter sat the battered spiral notebook he should have never opened, its pages now half-folded, as if even paper could flinch. Joel's voice was low. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. You already did. Welcome back. How are you all doing? Trust your day is going on well. Do well to support us by liking, subscribing, and sharing with friends. Thank you. Let's continue. Ella's grip tightened on the notebook, her cleaning gloves still damp. You think money gives you that right? He wanted to tell her no, that it wasn't like that, but the words inside that notebook had already proved otherwise. Grocery lists, overdue rent reminders, small affirmations written in rushed ink. Don't cry at work. Smile anyway. They were the kind of words that came from surviving, not living. For a man who built empires out of logic, Joel West found himself speechless. The woman standing across from him wasn't just a name on a payroll list. She was a whole life he'd never taken the time to see. Outside, lightning flashed over Lake Austin. Inside, silence pressed between them like a hell breath. I didn't read much, he lied. Her eyes met his steady, wounded, searching. You read enough. Ella turned, notebook clutched her chest. The front door opened, letting in a burst of cold rain before it closed behind her. Joel stayed where he was, the echo of her footsteps fading down the stone walkway. On the counter, one page of the notebook still lay open, ink blurred by a drop of water. He reached for it, before realizing the page wasn't hers. It was his handwriting, a single line he didn't remember writing. Some people leave their stories behind by accident. He stared at it, pulse quickening. Because if that line wasn't hers, then whose story had he really opened? For days, that question trailed Joel like a ghost through his glass-walled mansion. He started noticing things he'd never seen before, the quiet rhythm of life that moved around him while he'd been too busy to look. Ella's humming, soft, off-key, but steady. The way she folded towels with the same precision his engineers use for code. How she lined up his books alphabetically, wiped down handles no one would ever notice, and wrapped leftover bread in paper towels to take home instead of throwing it away. Each act was small, invisible, yet suddenly impossible for him to ignore. It wasn't just her. At Westline Tower, he began seeing others too. The janitor polishing the marble floor before sunrise, the receptionist who smiled at everyone whether they noticed her or not, the security guard who held the door open while Joel walked past without a glance. Now he saw them all, and it stung. For a man who'd spent years building systems and skyscrapers, he'd missed the human architecture holding it all together. And maybe you've done that too. Walked past someone who serves quietly without ever seeing the soul behind the task. If that thought tugs at you, maybe it's because stories like this aren't about them. They're about us. That night, Joel stood on the upper landing of his mansion, watching Ella move through the kitchen below, humming, folding, unaware. In his study drawer, the notebook waited, its pages whispering questions he still couldn't answer. But as she turned to leave, Joel caught sight of something new, a second notebook peeking from her bag. And this one wasn't the same color. That night, long after the city lights had faded to a blur across Lake Austin, Joel sat alone in his study. The house was still except for the faint ticking of the rain against the glass. The notebook lay in front of him again. He'd promised himself not to open it, but promises were easy when temptation felt far away. He lifted the cover. The handwriting was small and careful, the ink smudged in places where tears must have fallen. Mom, appointment at Del Seaton Friday at 3. Maddie's lunch, no chocolate, she gets too excited. Rent due Friday. Don't cry at work. Smile anyway. He read that last line twice, then a third time. Each word hit harder than the last, as if it carried the weight of every invisible hour she'd survived. Joel leaned back, eyes burning. He'd spent decades perfecting control, yet here he was, undone by a stranger's handwriting. Over the next few days, he began making quiet changes. A message to his accountant to raise the cleaning agency's contract rate. A note to replace the broken vacuum. Groceries delivered. Milk, ramen, fresh fruit. stocked neatly in his kitchen before she arrived. He told himself it was fairness, not pity. But deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Was it kindness or guilt? He stood at the window, watching the rain gather in silver threads over the city he'd built and suddenly couldn't recognize. "What kind of world makes someone write that?" he whispered. Outside, thunder rolled over the lake, low and heavy. Somewhere below, Ella's car headlights cut through the rain as she arrived for her next shift, unaware that her quiet words had changed the man waiting upstairs. And in her bag, beside her gloves and keys, the second notebook waited, its pages still unopened. The storm rolled in fast that night, thunder crawling over the lake like something alive. By the time Ella finished her shift, the roads from East Riverside were flooding, buses suspended, phones lighting up with weather alerts. "Looks like you're stuck here for a bit," Joel said quietly from the hallway. She hesitated, glancing toward the downpour. "I'll wait it out." He nodded toward the kitchen. "At least have some tea while you do." For a long moment, the only sounds were the rain and the low hum of the kettle. Ella sat at the counter, hair damp, sleeves rolled. She looked smaller in the vastness of his glass mansion, but somehow more real than anything inside it. "My mom's been in and out of Del Seaton for months," she said finally. "Maddie's 9. She thinks rain means angels are washing the sky." Joel smiled faintly. "That's a good way to see it." They talked, slowly at first, then easier, about her daughter's obsession with glitter glue, about her mother's stubbornness, about the difference between regular soap and what she called rich people's soap, stuff that smells like forest air and lies. Joel laughed genuinely. For once, he wasn't the billionaire or the boss, just a man listening, learning what a different kind of strength looked like. Lightning flashed, painting the room in silver light. Two silhouettes, worlds apart, yet closer than they'd ever been. When the thunder finally faded, Ella looked toward the dark window and whispered, "You ever wonder what happens when a storm passes?" Joel met her eyes. "Depends on what it leaves behind." Outside, the rain began to ease. Inside, something else had just begun. And upstairs, the second notebook waited, still unopened. The next Friday, the air over Lake Austin felt thick, charged, the kind of stillness that comes before rain. Ella was polishing the upstairs hallway when she heard them, two of the house staff whispering near the elevator. "Can you believe it? That's Joel West." The Joel West. Westline Towers, the tech billionaire. The rag slipped from her hand. For a second, the name didn't register. Then it did, and the world tilted. Joel West, the man who'd poured her tea, who'd laughed at her rich people's soap joke, the man who'd listened like no one else had. Her heartbeat hammered in her ears as every memory flipped upside down. The groceries, the raise, the quiet generosity that suddenly didn't feel generous at all. It felt like pity wearing kindness as disguise. By the time Joel came home that evening, her cleaning cart was packed. "Ella, what's going on?" "You could have told me who you were," she said, voice low but steady. "I wanted you to see me before the name." She shook her head. "That's the problem. You had the choice to hide who you were. I never did." He took a step closer, but guilt held him silent. Words, for once, weren't tools, just noise. Outside, thunder rolled again. The storm was back. She left without another word. The front door closed softly, the way people leave when they're too proud to slam it. And if this moment hits somewhere deep, if you've ever trusted someone only to realize they carried power you didn't know, let that sting stay. Don't turn away from it. Subscribe not to a story, but to reminders that truth matters more than wealth. Joel walked to the balcony, the rain returning in silver sheets. Below, Ella's car pulled onto the winding road, headlights fading into the Austin dark. He stayed there long after she disappeared, until lightning flashed across the water and, in its reflection, he saw something move inside her forgotten supply bag. A flash of blue. The second notebook. Weeks passed. The rain stopped, but Joel barely noticed. From his office on the 42nd floor of Westline Tower, he looked out at the skyline, his name glowing in white letters across the glass like a monument to everything that no longer mattered. The city pulsed below, alive and indifferent. He used to find comfort in that distance. Now it felt hollow. In the lobby, he caught glimpses he'd never seen before. The janitor buffing floors before dawn, the security guard nodding to every employee, the receptionist rubbing her temples between polite smiles. They weren't background anymore. They were the foundation he'd ignored. Within weeks, small changes began. New contracts, paid leave, health insurance for part-time staff, a livable wage across every division. His boardroom fell silent when he announced it. "You're cutting into profits," one partner warned. Joel just nodded. Maybe it's time profits took the cut. He didn't explain further. Some shifts weren't strategic, they were human. Across the city, Ella worked double shifts at a roadside motel off I-35. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The air smelled of bleach and stale coffee. She didn't talk about him, didn't want to, but sometimes when her hands stilled over clean sheets, she'd think of that night. The laughter, the storm, the way he'd listened. Two lives running parallel, haunted by the same ache. Conscience on one side, disappointment on the other. Late one evening, Joel stood alone in the darkened tower, staring at his reflection in the window, his own name behind him like a ghost. Then he saw something move in the glass. A figure below. In the lobby, someone holding a small blue notebook. He turned, heart pounding. The sky over Lake Austin was turning gold when Ellis stepped out of the taxi. She hadn't been to the mansion in weeks. The agency said a special client request had come through. Extra pay, no explanation. Inside, everything looked the same. The glass walls, the silence, the faint scent of cedar and rain. Then she saw it on the kitchen counter. Her old notebook. The cover was no longer torn. The pages were smooth, corners uncreased, tied neatly with a thin white ribbon. Her hands trembled as she untied it. Inside, a single note in careful handwriting. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." She blinked hard, unsure whether to feel anger or relief. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," said a voice behind her. Joel stood in the doorway. No suit, no mask of power, just a man with tired eyes and steady hands. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "But I learned what you meant about seeing people." Ella looked at him for a long time. The old ache was still there, but something else rose with it, recognition. Maybe change wasn't always a performance. Maybe, sometimes, people really did learn. They sat at the counter as twilight deepened, the lake outside reflecting fading light. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them felt different now. No longer heavy, but whole. As Ella prepared to leave, a soft knock echoed from the front door. Joel frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone." She turned toward the sound. Outside, the rain had started again, gentle this time, almost like memory. When the door opened, both of them froze. Because it wasn't a stranger standing there. It was Maddie. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the air clean and cool over Lake Austin. Ella stood by the window while Maddie explored the mansion, tracing her small fingers along the glass. Joel watched from the kitchen doorway, unsure how to speak into a piece he didn't deserve but wanted to honor. "You fixed my notebook," Ella said softly. "I thought it was the least I could do," Joel replied. "You gave me something I didn't know I was missing." She smiled faintly. "I forgave you weeks ago," she said. "I just needed to believe it first." He nodded, eyes distant. "I used to think power was purpose. Turns out, it's only noise until you use it to make something quiet mean something." For the first time, the mansion didn't feel cold. There were toys scattered on the counter, half-finished tea on the table, sunlight warming the stone floors. It felt lived in, human. Joel cleared his throat. "I've been working on something. Scholarships for single parents in Austin. No headlines, no photos. I'd like to name it after your mother, if that's all right." Ella looked at him, surprised. "That's kind," she said. "But you don't owe me anything." "I know," he said. "That's why it feels right." Outside, the sun dipped low, spilling gold across the lake. The water caught the light like glass, still even infinite. They stood side by side, saying nothing. Two silhouettes reflected on the same surface, equal in the calm. As Maddie's laughter echoed down the hall, Joel turned toward the sound, a question rising quietly in his chest. What kind of world could they build if more people learned to see this way? Months passed. The question didn't fade. It became the blueprint. Across Austin, new policies began surfacing in workplaces once ruled by hierarchy and haste. Joel's quiet reforms spread like sunlight through tall glass buildings. Equal pay audits, on-site childcare, shared ownership programs. No speeches, no headlines, just steady human change. Ella watched it unfold from a distance. She'd stopped cleaning houses. Instead, she opened a small cooperative off East Cesar Chavez. 6 women, 1 mission. Fair wages, shared profit, dignity in every task. She called it Homelight. The walls were painted sunflower yellow, and in the break room sat a stack of notebooks, blank, waiting for new stories. One afternoon, while sorting supplies, Ella found another notebook, new and empty, a gift left anonymously on her desk. She smiled, knowing who it was from even before she opened the first page. Inside, only 5 words were written. Keep teaching the world to see. Later that week, Joel visited the cooperative's first office near South Congress Avenue. He didn't wear a suit, didn't bring cameras, just a plain envelope and a quiet heart. Inside the envelope was a check with no name attached. He left it at the counter and turned to leave. But before he reached the door, Ella looked up from her desk. Their eyes met, warm, knowing, grateful. Nothing needed to be said. Some truths speak louder in silence. He didn't fall in love with her because she needed saving. He fell in love because she reminded him how to see. And if this story stirred something real, not romance but recognition, stay. Because somewhere between noise and numbness, stories like this still matter. They remind us that empathy, when practiced quietly, can rebuild entire worlds. That sometimes revolutions don't roar, they whisper. So if you felt that whisper tonight, don't let it fade. Stay for the next story. Don't stop supporting the channel. Like, subscribe, and share to make it go viral, because the quiet revolution doesn't end here. It begins with whoever chooses to keep seeing.